Oh, righty, here we are.
Welcome.
In Norman's office. And we're going to just do a quick pan of the office here so you get a sense of where we are. So this is Norman's illustrious space where all the beautiful music happens. And here's Norman right over here. Let me just fix that camera a little bit.
Yeah, good.
How's that look to you, Norman? Okay? Does it look good on the camera?
I'm there, I guess.
I'll be
Yeah,
over
and your
there,
seat
too.
is there, so we're good.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. Now, I'm here too.
Oh, good.
You're here. I'm here. We're all here together.
That's everybody.
Good. But we just wanted to give you a sense of context about where we hang out here and where we
We've
make
been
the
doing
beautiful
these things.
where we make the beautiful music happen.
Yeah.
But it's been a little while since we've.
It has been a
done
little
that.
while, and
Yeah.
it made me think about something I often describe is that things are always changing, maybe imperceptibly, but they accumulate until they burst into awareness. And it seems that for you and for me, this last time lapse, forgiving the session that didn't make it, important things have impacted us.
See.
Yeah,
Yes.
so speaking for me, the elephant in my room involves someone profoundly dear to me who we discovered has cancer and is now dealing with it and learning about all the options and all of the inconveniences and uncomfortablenesses that go along with that. And it really confronts you. I was going to say forces you, but it doesn't force you so much as it gives you the opportunity to think about, holy shit, so all of this stuff that you never think about, or that maybe you hear about with other people. Oh, they're struggling with this or they're fighting that. Those are just words to you, and you do your best to empathize. But empathy, which is putting yourself in someone else's shoes, you can't do you can't do adequately enough, right, until and unless you're in that shoe store. And so it's at one level, not the level where you resist the self-talk that confront you with dying and loss and assessment of your life, etc. You get to stand back and look at this as just a new phase, a new chapter, a new part of life, your life, that you never had access to before.
Mm-hmm.
And at the risk of sounding like I'm in denial, and I'm pretty good at knowing when I am and I'm not, I find it interesting. It's like, oh, wow. So this is what
this is
end
like.
of life can be like. This is what getting older really is
like. It's not an abstraction anymore.
That's a good way to put it. It's not an abstraction anymore. Yeah. And so, secondary to this, that chapter in my life that I'm enduring and dealing with, not unhappily, but with acceptance, it just broadens your awareness of the truth of things.
Mhm.
And it's just the way it goes. And it's the way it has always
been.
gone
It's always
for
been.
everybody that has gone through it.
Yeah.
And for each of us, it's new and feels unique.
Mhm.
And you know, around the edges, in some flourish here and there, it is unique for
Right.
us.
We're
But
having our own unique
but
experience, but
not in terms of that which is human.
right.
It's not.
Yeah.
And it's just
I mean, in some ways, it's a huge privilege, right? I mean, you know, we're living into the point of where this is supposed to be happening. I mean, a lot of people have to go through this a lot sooner. You know what I mean? They have to deal with,
or
you know,
well,
and meaning a lot. You know, I have friends
a lot
who
of people
died
don't
in
get the run up
in
to
their
it.
50s, you know,
Yeah,
and
they
stuff
don't
like
get
that.
maybe
So,
they don't get the run up to it. You
right.
know, it's just like that.
Right, exactly. They don't get the run up. They don't get the, yeah, it can happen.
Opportunity
to go through
be
it
with it.
consciously, you know. I
Right.
mean, sometimes it just happens because it happens to people.
Yeah, and you
know,
deal
and
with the
so,
suddenness of it
right.
and the brevity of it, perhaps.
Right. Yeah. I
But
mean, I'm sure you've had experiences with that too. I mean, I've had people who I have a friend of mine who went into the hospital with like a sore neck, right? He was like
right.
51. And
meningitis
he had cancer and bone
Oh.
cancer in his neck, and he was gone in like 2 months. Like he woke up several nights with pain in his neck, and it wasn't going away. Goes in, gets diagnosed. 2 months later, he was dead.
That's the other piece.
And he was
The
51.
people on the other end, the medical people on the other end, whose job it is to shepherd you through this, you attribute to them that they are your partner and good mommy or good daddy and all of this, when in fact, when you leave, it's next, and it's their job.
Yeah.
And they've had to find a way to compartmentalize it, much in the same way I do on my job. When I hear heartbreaking things, you have to learn, and it can take time, how not to have that. I was going to say pollute or taint your life, but that's not what it does.
No,
it affects
but
you.
it can
in a
consume
way.
you in a way.
That's right, and you need to learn how to understand it so that you are separate from it.
Right. I think you're getting to the point where, so you have to cultivate your empathy. You have to, what I wouldn't mind talking to the difference between empathy and compassion, because this gets thrown around a lot in our world of
sympathy.
It's sympathy, empathy, compassion, and being able to distinguish what you're doing, you know, with those things, so that you can be most helpful, right?
Right, but it's not all voluntary. I mean,
no, some of it is just, it's happening. And this is the thing about what I think you're talking about is, how do we allow ourselves to feel these things, which is what empathy is you're feeling the feeling, and yet not get consumed by them, because this is not wrong. See, that's the thing. The people, when they feel like natural. Something you know, bad is happening, when they say bad, it's like somebody is ill or dying. But actually, no, this is exactly how it goes. This is exactly
even if it's a car accident, it's just a function of probability.
Right. Yeah.
It's how.
Right. So you have to be able to hold that truth at the same time being empathetic, and compassionate with sadness and the loss and
that you're in it
and everything else.
You're not looking down on it. You're in it.
Yeah, you're in it with them. But in order not to get completely sucked in and overwhelmed, you have to keep this other reality going on, which is this happens.
Yes, that's the requirement if you're a professional in all of this. But
even when you're like a family member, to some extent, it's like, I mean, I'm sure you're trying to do this with your loved one, is that you're keeping both of these things you're aware of both of these things at the same time.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could fall apart too. And then is that going to help
No.
this person? No.
Yeah, but it's not a voluntary.
Right.
If you fold, that you didn't choose to fold, largely.
Right.
But
how do you keep from folding? Because I think, say you had two of these things going on at the same time. Say you had one here and a child as well, or something like that. Now the chances of getting overwhelmed is pretty high. Right?
That's right.
Chance of having a nervous breakdown pretty high.
That's right.
So what do we do to stay empathetic and compassionate and not?
If you get overwhelmed, by definition, that comes from without. You are overwhelmed by it,
right?
And you don't get to dispatch the wave that has tumbled you underneath.
But do you think there are things you can do, whether you're a professional or not, to stave off the overwhelm?
And here's my insight.
I think about this a lot because I think this is what's going on societally as well.
Here's my insight about it. I didn't come to this and first intended to do something about it. I have been doing something about it by the way I have lived and what I have learned and my experiences and my training. And I had a readiness to deal with this that was dormant. And we are each dealing with this quite well. We're dealing with, okay, so this is what it is now.
Right.
Here's what we can do now. And be peace with that and dispatch the self-talk that says, oh my God, it's going to be death in the end, and what? Then what? And then you run off it all like that.
Or get into the victim mode. Why is this happening to me?
Well,
there's lots of ways to go.
I lost that a long time ago. It's.
But sometimes people who are going through it haven't lost it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you might have lost it, but they might haven't. You have to be empathetic with the fact that they haven't lost it.
Right. Now you're talking about helping somebody through it.
Right. Yeah.
I'm talking about it from first person.
Yes.
I long ago understood that all of life is probability. And therefore I'm not assigning it to God or wondering how can there be a God.
You are not exempt,
my friend.
There's this line from Buddhism that says, I am not exempt. I'm not exempt from the vicissitudes of life. They are going to happen.
Right. The vicissitudes of life is exactly right.
Right.
It's not a prime mover doing it to me.
Right. They are just going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, how did people who went through the Holocaust reconcile that and also still believe in God? I mean,
exactly.
Come on now.
Yeah.
God has a plan, or I don't know how they rationalize it, but that would have lost me from the get-go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I keep coming back to trying to be open, honest, graceful, and kind. Like, it doesn't mean I do it all the time.
It doesn't mean we succeed.
But I realize, okay, when I'm feeling this tension or this kind of like I'm dealing with some family stuff in my own, that it's like, okay, this could cause resentment, misunderstanding. Like, how do I engage with this in as graceful, open, honest, kind way as possible, so that it just minimizes the chances of that. You know what I mean?
You're talking about being in a place where you get to wield some control, but I know shit's happened to you in the last few months that was outside of your control. That you have to go, or oh shit, now what?
Right. Yeah, and I mean, we don't control. All we have the control over, again, is our response, right? And so
And so it's more like, okay, I think about that in terms of my response. I don't have control over what happens in the world and how other people are going to react. All I have control over is how, not, and it's limited, my control. I think I have control over my reactions and response, but actually I know that there's lots of preconditions that are playing themselves out and without a lot of consciousness are going to play themselves out no matter
Right.
what.
The people we have become,
Right.
In our strengths and weaknesses,
Yeah.
Will out in situations like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the more stressful or overwhelming it is, the more your tendency to respond reflexively. And those reflexively,
Yes.
like, so just instinctively, but those reflexes and instincts are usually born out of conditioning and trauma. So conditioning and trauma is where that's our lowest common denominator.
Right.
And we'll go there if we're under enough stress and anxiety. We will just, that's
right. It can overwhelm. I mean,
so, this is why I practice. This is why I meditate. This is why I do breathing exercises all the time, so that I realize, okay, when this shit comes up, I want to respond from a place of higher consciousness rather than lower consciousness, because the shit will come up.
Right. And that is at the heart of the value of what you as a professional bring to the table. It's a little different for me. It's less spiritual, although I'm informed by that which is spiritual, which makes me a little better of a guide, I suppose.
I think I mean, my feeling now, studying what you've spent your life working with, is that they're very complementary. It's like they're sort of,
that's what we're doing.
Structural theories that you can apply and bring a spiritual understanding to, and so
and that's real. It's the more, and there's now these days tons of persuasive primary research that is begging you to come into our domain, because what you bring is stuff we have never been able to touch that works.
I find it so interesting now that with the mindfulness stuff that's been going on for quite a while now, the spirituality, and now there's like all this plant medicine stuff going on, but now there are also these counterindication studies. Like, there are some people who meditate and it makes them worse,
Listen,
and
there's a whole rainbow, and there's always going to be people three standard deviations from the mean on either end.
But that reminded me of this time when I was at Kripalu. This is like when 20 years ago, I was at Kripalu, and they remember them telling us the story about, we really need to, when we take people into teacher training, we need to screen them for
where on the rainbow
they are on the rainbow, because doing deeper spiritual work can exacerbate psychosis, for instance, and so it's like, okay, is this person on the psychotic scale? Because if they are, they probably shouldn't do this work.
But that's a very interesting ethical question, because you all aren't trained.
No, but all you can do is just, you have a sort of, you're not trained to do that diagnosis, but if they know it already, then it's helpful information. If they've been diagnosed by someone else, then you can use that information in terms of whether or not they should be doing particular practices, because some of these practices will alter your consciousness, and altering your consciousness under certain can be dangerous. So it's like, there we go. All right. It's good to know. Now, we don't have control over that all. They go into saying, listen, you do your best. We don't know. Sometimes that's why when you're learning these techniques, you do so gradually, because it'll tell you, you're going to get feedback, whether it works or not. So I wouldn't recommend anybody to jump into a 10-day silent meditation retreat if they've never done meditation before.
If they've never kept their mouth shut.
I would not recommend that, because that will freak you out, most likely. Or it could seriously freak you out if you haven't done any experiments along the way. So,
Know your own limits.
No, I mean, so there's yeah, anyways, I just find it very interesting, that whole world of how we bring some of these traditional indigenous and yogic spiritual practices and start bringing them into the more therapeutic professional setting. It's
Well,
going to be very interesting.
It's not an accident that you were drawn into expanding your professional sphere, scope, had to have come naturally. And my affiliation and attraction to having gone in that direction comes naturally. It's
Right.
so compatible. It's so
yeah, they're like they're like two worlds that come from different perspectives that are actually trying to
that
do the same
belong
thing.
together.
Yeah,
belong
You
together.
know, they belong together,
And we're just starting to
they
understand
just help
this.
us to understand ourselves better. From different perspectives. So and then hopefully accelerate the healing and functioning process. If we can. So we'll see. It's all experiment. The other thing you're talking about in the medical profession, and we do want to put our medical providers like a little bit on a pedestal, so that we have faith in them and that kind of thing. But you and I have talked about this before. It's all just educated experiments. That's all that, it's like, okay, you have these set of diagnoses. We've done this in the past. It has this level of probability of working.
Right.
Let's try that.
But what you and I are responsible for understanding is that the people who come to us attribute to us, it's called transference, transfer to us a superpower, or that we are here and they're here, that we're the good mommy or good daddy, when in fact we're just people.
Right.
And
now, do you maintain that in your therapy? Like as I've been working at least with more of the spiritual practices over time, I start to talk much more about co-collaborating. Like we are creating this experience together. Like this isn't me here and you here. Sharing with you my wisdom, knowledge, experience. However, the longer we work on this together, the more it's like, how is this working for you? What are you bringing? Because I don't know either. In the end, this stuff certainly about like in spiritual work, it's like, do I know what enlightenment is? I only know. No, I mean, it's like I'm just moving there. I'm doing experiments too. I've done a lot already, so that helps me inform my experience. But the more I work with somebody, the more I try to dispel this notion of I'm here.
That's a very, very interesting dynamic. And you're talking about people who you've worked with for some time, and who are capable and open and have the tools to ride along with you at a sophisticated level. You're talking about being more and more honest, but there is always that dividing line. There's always that danger of boundary violation. You're not their friend. You're not their business partner. And God forbid you're not their lover. And so those have to be rock solid, spelled out if it starts to feel like it's getting contaminated.
Right.
That has to be clear in everything you do and say. And then you have the liberty, if in your judgment, you can bring this person closer, you can bring this person more on a par with you and share with them your doubts, your vulnerabilities. That's in the service of your treatment. It's in the service of your treatment to show, hey, this dude isn't a god. He's human just like me. And that is a reassuring thing for whoever your client or patient is. But you need to be very self-aware. And you probably need to have had the experiences you and I have had, where we go through our own spiritual and or therapeutic processes to understand what the danger points might be, what our vulnerabilities are.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
besides transference,
the counter transference, right?
besides transference, which is when your client and patient attributes things to you, the good daddy, the good mommy.
Right.
There's also countertransference, which is, why am I bummed out that she's coming today? You know, that's my problem.
Right, that's my stuff.
Then I can't do my job. What I'm getting paid for. And I have to, and if I can't do it on my own, I got to go get myself some supervision and understand it better. That's my responsibility. And yours.
Yeah. It seems like it's, you know, there's such a huge world in there too, because, you know, at least in what I'm learning now about, you know, not just the therapeutic and counseling aspect, but the advocacy aspect. I mean, this countertransference can not just go to, why am I resisting this person, but why am I taking more responsibility for this person than I probably should be, right? You know, why do I care beyond the therapeutic setting? You know, how this person.
How can I help when we're not in session and send them things?
Right, and yet there's quite, at least in school right now, you know, talk about this advocacy and how you help bring the resources that people need, you know, in terms of.
That's what a social worker does.
Yeah.
That's the job of a social worker.
Right.
So you need to have a couple of good social workers to whom you can refer.
Right. Yeah. You
need to know what your role is, and as importantly, what it ain't.
Right. Yeah. But it seems like there's, I don't know, how do I put it? It's just, it's not clearly, it hasn't clearly defined itself yet.
Because in a way they're your children, and you want to fix it. They're you know, you want to fix it.
Yeah.
That was in my very early days, that was a real problem for me. The person would come in, we'd identify a problem, however many sessions that took, and I'd want to fix it. I'd want to like do what I would do for me or my son.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's not gonna go that way.
That's not your job.
Right.
There are exceptions to that. I mean, I'm just recalling a phone call I had yesterday, Sunday, from a patient I had for some time, and you know, they went their own ways, and a couple of years later, he texts me and says, I'm having trouble. Can I Zoom you now? And I said, well, first of all, Zooming, telehealth is these days fraught with major ethical issues, myriad ethical issues. You do not take it lightly. You do not do telehealth unless the professional on the other end has all their ducks in a row. I'm not going to go into it. That's a story for another 10 sessions. So you don't, at least I choose not to do that until and unless everything is understood, informed consents are signed. But so I said, he said, let's Zoom, and no, let's just have and I explained that, and let's just have a phone call. And there are some real concrete issues going on, and I had some really good ideas about what to do. He doesn't have many people in his life, and his mother's no help. You know, she should have been on all of this when he was a child and wasn't. So I counter-transferentially want to be the good dad. And I'm weighing this in my mind, you know, bells are going off, but I realize I can give him concrete things to do, people to call, ways to be, that fixes it. I gave it to him. It was like, and this was simple shit. This is stuff any mother should have known to do. And it was helpful. So there's always, when you're dealing in human enterprise, you can't say never do this or always do that. So when you and I talk about, you can't fix it for someone, that's a good general rule, and it's not always true.
Right. I mean, I just think there are all these just nuances going on. We talked about the nuances between empathy and compassion and that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, where is this? Okay, I'm feeling this person's pain or suffering. I want to help them. Right now, what am I willing to do to help them? Which is where I think compassion.
And they expect you to help them, and so you feel that burden.
Right. So it's now that, okay, we say, all right, we're here to help people help themselves, but there's again these just sort of like, interesting, as you said, at some point you can give more direction. At some point you really need to let them come to their own conclusions. Right.
So, what I learned over time that was helpful for me was that you need to identify where that person is when they come in.
Mm-hmm.
So if a person's down here, it's not realistic to expect that you're going to get them up here.
Mm-hmm.
It is a success if you get them here.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you get them here, you can get them here. And at some threshold, they can stand on their own 2 feet.
Right.
And the goal is not to fix it for them and take them from here to here so much as it is to get them to stand on their own 2 feet, come back to you if there are problems like this kid did, and get them out the door. Okay, so long, come back if you need to. It's not, the Woody Allen-esque analysts that keep them 5 days a week for 40 years. That's great for the therapist, but that's malpractice.
Mm-hmm.
Or psychoanalysis, depending on how you want to say it.
Right.
Sorry to all you analysts out there, that ship has sailed largely.
Yeah, for the most part, most people really want to do that work.
Well, it's not an accident that nobody reimburses for that.
Mm-hmm.
The terribly affluent can afford it, but it's not an evidence-based successful treatment for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
It works for some, but it's probably a more efficient way to get around. If a person could be helped with that, they might have been helped sooner, more efficiently otherwise.
Yeah.
But that's,
So how are you feeling about your own, I know you've had your own, you have somebody else that you're caring about right now, but you've also had yourself to care about.
Yeah.
How's that affecting things?
I have come to a point with my teams of doctors to understand what the new landscape is, what the new limits are, what can be helped with medicine and what can't. And I've come to accept that. I'm at peace with that. And frankly, that my acceptance I came to it readily.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, okay.
Okay.
So
here's where we are now.
Yeah, here's where we are now. Fuck. And you're 76 years old. And it's probably a lot better today than it's going to be tomorrow, kind of thing.
It's better today than it will be tomorrow. I think that's a really interesting,
because that's the way deterioration goes. That's the way telomeres on the ends of your cells live out.
Yeah. Yeah. But it also, it really helps keeping you present in a way, because most people go through much of their lives wanting to believe it'll be better tomorrow than it is today.
Well,
right.
When you're not 76,
right.
When you're younger than 76, that can be true.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 36, 26, 56, it can still be true. Less and less,
right,
as you get older. The problem is, or a problem can be, your expectation. or your assumptions, if there's a gap, we've talked about this,
Yeah.
but it's worth repeating. The larger the gap between your expectations and assumptions and reality, the larger that gap, the more the suffering. Now, here's reality. To narrow that gap, what needs to be done? Change the reality or change the assumptions and expectations? And I really think I have always known that. I intuitively have known that, which was why this is so fluid for me, so easy for me. And again, you could accuse me of being in denial, but that's a comprehensive denial, and there have been no cracks in my acceptance of this. My expectations are damn close these days, maybe
To what's showing up.
to what's showing up. That's a great way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And my assumptions are spot on.
Right.
And there are no contradictions. Experience has not, falsified that explanation.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to kind of deal with this whole, like, this notion between the, expectations and assumptions and reality. And, part of again, Buddhist teachings talks about sort of dispelling the idea of hope and hopefulness, because to a certain level, it's unreal. It's like
What's unreal?
hope,
What's unreal?
well, not that hope isn't unreal, but that we want things to be better than they are. And that causes some suffering for us, as opposed to accepting things as they are. And then that doesn't mean you can't work to make things different. But you're also accepting how things are. And because it just seems to me like so many people are unhappy for some reason because they want things to be different than the way they are.
Absolutely.
Right? But the problem is the way they are is pretty fucking good. It's pretty damn good. Do you see what I mean? Like see what you mean. It's like, here we are. I mean, we'll see how, this could go out on the World Wide Web and be seen in Afghanistan. However, the majority of people are going to be from somewhere around here, which is like, okay, it's going to get better than this. You see what I mean? Like, here we are in Fairfield County, Norman. It's like, and we're dealing with this stuff. You're dealing with your stuff. I'm dealing with my stuff, some of which is unpleasant or difficult. But do we really think it's going to be better somewhere else or something else? You see what I mean?
I think it's the people who think it should be better.
Right.
I should be happier. And I've said this before in these talks, I have a big problem when I hear the word should. Because who is revealing to you ought? What ought to be?
Right. So I also feel like, man, somehow my life has landed here as opposed to Afghanistan or, somewhere else in the world.
Calcutta.
And there's just millions. There's so many places we could list. Now, that is not, to think that I've landed here just by my volition is ridiculous, right? It's so much of it is just good fortune. And it's like, okay, why don't I recognize my good fortune while dealing with the shit that's happening in my life? As opposed to most people are just dealing with seeing, why is this happening to me? Or this shouldn't be happening to me. In the meantime, forgetting that you somehow landed here out of just
really it is happening to me.
Right. But I find that juxtaposition so interesting to me, that people don't realize their blessings in the midst of their difficulties.
People should try. I mean, I've never been to India. You have, but I know, and I've seen, and
traveling to India is you wake up.
There are people living in abject squalor and smiling all the time,
and who are happier than most of the people we know here. Yeah, it's really quite. It's quite phenomenal.
They know suffering all around them, children suffering, disease, crowding, starvation, and they're happy.
Yeah. They aren't thinking that it's not, it's not supposed to be this way.
Right.
You know,
Right.
they do think, well, you know, it would be good if it were better, and how can I improve things? And they're working hard, but they're not thinking it's supposed to be different than this. Not
It should be
yeah.
different.
Now, one can make some arguments about how, you know, we should try to, you know, raise up the boats of people and the conditions of people like that.
If you're in a position to,
If you're in a position to do
you know,
that,
if you've got
right?
$1 billion and you spend
Or
200
just
million
even
going
how-
into space instead
right.
of feeding starving
Exactly.
children,
How we can
that's a little
rearrange-
misguided.
How we can restructure society to bring more people out of poverty, that would be a good idea, right? But if you're in it, the question is, what are you going to do? You know,
Right, and
what are your
that's the population with which we deal.
Mhm.
That your clients, my patients, that's the perspective we need to hold on to. Is to somehow get them to course correct, to help them understand an alternative way of thinking
Mhm.
about what has befallen them or what has graced them.
Right.
I start with probabilities, but you could start anywhere as long as you can narrow that gap.
Right.
And
So is
get
that like CBT stuff? Is that cognitive behavioral therapy stuff? It's like
it-
thinking
it is
about your
largely
life
that
differently.
where you take
Right.
where you articulate
Yeah.
some self-talk that is misguided or wrong or in one way, shape, or form diminishes you or tortures you or whatever you're doing to yourself with that, and reframe it in a way to understand it in its natural neutral state, so that you can yourself export from the therapy room another way to frame it.
Right. To perceive it.
That's right.
Right.
That takes a lot of hard work.
Yeah. Yeah, and then another way to respond to it, you know, because response has a reinforcing effect, right? So if we're responding to our situation differently, then it's going to create a different result ultimately, as opposed to recreating. You know, what is that thing by Einstein? Like, you know, keep doing the same thing and you get the same
Yeah.
result.
First of all, he never said that. Second of all, that's not the definition of crazy. And I wish people would understand that, because it's attributed to him and they accept it as the definition of insane or crazy. That, no and no.
Right.
That's not it.
But the point
it's a problem.
Yeah.
To keep doing the same thing. Why? My understanding is because it's the devil you know is more comfortable than the devil you don't know. So you keep doing shit because it's comfortable.
No, I don't think that's insane. I think that that's normal, you know, in a way. That, I mean, people do. We talked about earlier. I think most of our responses to things comes out of conditioning and some form. You know, obviously, the stuff that we get stuck on is stuck in some trauma. So it's like,
yes,
we're not learning to try a different way, because this response has been sort of
that's right, and in some perverse way,
right?
In some perverse way,
right.
We are comfortable with or at peace with the stuff that damages us. Mm-hmm. It's comfortable.
Yeah,
we keep
affiliating
with the wrong mate because they mimic the bad daddy or the bad mommy, right. and you're at peace. You're at home with that.
Yes. Right. So this is the stuff I find super fascinating, you know, is how we replicate these patterns that don't ultimately serve us.
And they need to be challenged. Right. And the key, and we've talked about this, the key to anybody getting themselves out of it is first an awareness that they're in it and they don't want it. And then, and this is a must, a readiness to do something about it. You're not going to change anything without doing something. And that something is by necessity different from what you've been doing, because the patterns in your life that have been showing up haven't been working by your own admission. Now, there are a lot of people who live and die and never lose those patterns because either they aren't aware of it or because they're not ready to do anything about it. It's too scary.
They're working for them.
It's it's too scary to change.
Yeah.
But if you're lucky enough and insightful enough, enlightened enough to know this ain't working, therefore I need to change, they have to be ready to do that, to do the work. And change involves doing something, and doing something you're not familiar with. And so it's going to feel alien, it's going to feel artificial.
Right.
And you're going to reject it on those grounds. It makes it very easy to reject. Oh, I don't know. I'm not eating snails.
Right. So what do you think about this? There's this sort of like two, I don't know if it's schools of thought or if it's the way you call it, but the one where the therapist is bringing out this sort of answer from the client, and one where they're suggesting, could you think of it this way? So there's this notion of like, okay, the wisdom is already within, but say you're ready, but you just are ignorant. You just can't, you're ignorant in some way. I mean, I'm exaggerating because nobody's ignorant completely.
This is the job of the therapist to get them to look at it another way and to lead them to water.
Right. I mean, like but yeah, you could say something like, well, let's just try to do some breathing right now. Like right now in this, they would never come up with that on their own, right? Because they just don't have any concept of breathing.
You would do that, right? if you saw that they were getting in their own way and their own anxieties, and you needed them to
it just seems like as I'm reading about these different theories, there's sort of two tracks. One is, you're not ever giving advice. You never give advice
lose the word never.
Yeah, as advice. And I'm just like, I mean, maybe it's because I've come out of the coaching model of teaching, right? That it's just like, sometimes advice can expedite the process,
Or so you could lead them to it by
or an opinion can expedite the process. I mean, whether you want to call it advice.
Is there another way to think about that? Is there another way to do that?
Yeah.
And if that's not good enough, what if you did this kind of thing? If you thought that they could handle that sort of thing.
I mean, I guess it's this whole thing about whether, we talked about it earlier about where you stand, and there's these, Rogerian theory, you don't come in as the expert, the client is the expert. And I'm like, what if the client doesn't know?
The Rogerian thing is really captured me when I was in school.
Yeah.
Because he was in this sea of behaviorists, was this humanist. And talked about unconditional positive regard.
Right.
What they bring to the table,
that's
a lot
who
of
they
stuff
are. Is great.
What you bring to the table is your understanding that you're perfect just the way that you are. And that's a good starting point.
I agree with that.
That's a real
I think real regard on a deep level for whoever is showing up is usually, most people are disregarded most of the time, right? So, not all the time, but a lot. And so if you can give them positive, like see them as a real human being with real value.
And you have to behave that.
Yeah.
And in order to behave it, you have to believe it.
Yeah.
Because if you're faking it, you dead. You dead in the water.
Well, I
think
that
wrong business.
What you're trying to do for me, and I've had some experience recently with this, is like where I'm on the receiving end of it, is you're building trust with someone who can possibly help you grow, where you can take that next step.
Right.
But you have to have this sort of trust
that's
in the process, because everything that you've been used to, all this conditioning and trauma that I talked, it's still playing itself. It's playing. It's like a movie in the background.
But there's no script for developing trust.
Sort of leap, and what gives you the courage to make that leap
with this
person? A trust in this process, this person, and yourself. Like it's almost like a triumphant. It's like, okay,
well, a lot of people will come to you with no self-trust.
Right. So you have to trust something, or else you won't make the leap. You see what I mean?
That they're there is a huge affirmation for their courage and their and hopefulness.
Willingness. Yeah.
If
I agree.
They're there.
Yeah. No, if they show up,
I can't tell you all the times people have
that.
Reached out to me through my website or through referrals. I'm having this problem, and they make an appointment. Don't show up.
Right.
That's
lots of
50%. Don't show up.
Yeah. No, I agree. Showing up is a huge sign of readiness. Yeah.
And you have to reinforce, wow, it's really great that you're here.
Mhm.
It's really great that you made the call. It's really great that you came.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, it is huge because it is a
Right.
willingness to look at things differently.
It's a willingness that I'm unhappy and I can't do this anymore.
Mhm. Yeah.
People live and die and they live and die unhappy and keep doing it.
Yeah.
Most people.
Most people. Yeah, most people, as you said, there's a comfort level in the familiarity, whether the
The devil you
familiarity
know.
is functional or not.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I say this in class sometimes. I say, most everybody you know, which includes yourself, is on a low level of misery, low to moderate level of misery. And people look at me like, what are you talking about?
The way I say it is,
Yeah.
everybody you know, everybody you see on the street is fucked up in some important way.
I like that
Including
one
me.
too. Yeah, yeah, including me. Yeah. So yeah, no, and I think, but there's
And that's
something
a comforting
very
thing because people
it
think
is comforting.
I'm in a shrink's
Right.
office.
Yeah.
I must be crazy.
Yeah. No, I mean, I actually find that,
I'm in a shrink's
that
office and I am
comforting.
crazy.
Because it's just sort of like, okay, we start from this base of just kind of fucked upness or, or
It's
woundedness or whatever it is. And
human
it's like,
condition.
okay,
We're
how
all
can,
in this together and we're
Yeah.
all the same.
and that I think is
Fundamentally.
fundamentally, I agree. Yeah. We have different circumstances and different experiences, but fundamentally we're the same.
Yeah. There is no brand new psychopathology on the planet. It's all been here before.
Mhm.
The shamefullnesses are universal.
Yeah, as I said to somebody, they're anxious about the state of the world, and I said, people have been doing fucked up shit to each other
Yeah.
since people have been around,
Yeah.
and we're just going through another wave of it right now. And it's
Thank God you weren't alive during the Crusades.
Yeah, exactly.
Or the Spanish Inquisition.
Just fucked up bad shit to each other, and we seem to not be able to evolve out of it, and we're just it's going on another wave, and it's like we have to try to be as nice and kind and and also not to not resist, but to be
identify the
Yeah.
stuff that you
Right.
can influence and distinguish it from the stuff you can't.
Yeah.
And don't squander your resources in the latter.
Right.
Your time, your
and don't
energy,
squander your
money.
energy. Mostly, it's just I actually I empathize again. I go back to empathy because the anxiety can get pretty high, and you realize if this anxiety goes much higher, this person's going to start to become unfunctional, and it's like, okay,
It's gonna
can we reel ourselves back off
or
of the
it's
ledge
gonna
here?
make them
Yeah.
more profoundly unhappy.
Right. Or and that kind of anxiety and being anxious about things we can't influence. I mean, I think that's the cause of a lot of disease and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, there's no question.
Because all that cortisol is running through your system
Yeah.
all the time,
The
and that
link-
cortisol is bad for you. Okay.
The link,
So
the link between the psychic and the physical
Yeah.
is real.
yeah, it's pretty well established, and
That's
so
right.
and
That's why I've stopped watching the news, reading the news, listening to the news, because I found myself getting organically angry.
right,
And so, Norman, the fuck?
right.
You
And that
know,
caused-
you know the old joke, guy goes into the doctor, says, doctor, it hurts when I go like this.
Yeah.
You know what the doctor
Yeah.
says? Don't go like
Stop
this.
doing that.
So that's what I've stopped. I'm aware of how much more at peace I am, because every time I read a headline or I see or I'm with people who are talking about that stuff, it's like, whew, it's not touching me now.
Mm-hmm.
The
Yeah.
motherfucker's going to die, and it won't be in my lifetime that we'll get over his damage, but it'll happen.
Yeah.
The pendulum will swing
The
back.
pendulum will swing. Yes, it will. And so, yeah, I just trying to help myself and others and I tell
You have
say
to
the same thing.
identify the stuff
You know,
you can control.
Minimize your consumption of media. That will help. And
Yes.
people look at me like I'm crazy again. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
but
no, but it will help.
yeah.
Minimize your consumption about
Do
media.
it. My own physician, I'm on the examining table, my annual physical, and she's talking and she's wringing her hands and lamenting, because I've known her for decades, and she's talking to me about all of this goings on in this new world of ours. And I told her what my solution was, and it was like that didn't even compute until I walked out. She said, "So what am I going to do?" And try that.
Oh, she asked it again.
Try that.
Yeah.
Try that.
Yeah.
And notice.
Yeah. Notice how you feel. That's what I mean by going back to experiments. It's like, try this and notice how you feel. Notice if you feel
right.
Better,
Look, this breathing exercise I'm giving you, you've never done it before, seems alien, but the next time you feel XYZ or you're over here, try it and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can do this. I'm going to do this now in front of you. And then I think we have to stop.
Sure.
So, I just want you to watch me. Just watch what I do and be with me. Now, I think if you're paying attention, you're aware of some sense of relief or relaxation vicariously. Imagine if you did that, it wouldn't be vicarious. And that was only one breath.
Mm-hmm. Nice job. Nice demonstration.
Well, but it's real.
You can feel it. Yeah.
You can feel it.
Yes.
Just because it isn't tactile or empirical, it's real.
But what's also interesting is if you start to become aware of your breath, another person will start to breathe differently.
Well, that's Socrates.
So
Socrates didn't teach. You learned from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you actually, by being that way,
that's right.
Other people will start to feel that way and actually start to do that as well.
Guru. That's a guru. You're not there to teach. The Dalai Lama isn't telling you what to do. He's just showing.
Right. He's just being.
Yeah, he's just being.
He's just being. That's all. But through being in proximity, you start to actually take on those attributes.
Yeah, and you also, there's a lot of that transference, good daddy type stuff, but
yes. But that can be, I mean, as you said, we go back to the trust thing. You need to be able to trust somebody.
That's the therapeutic alliance.
Right?
That's
you need to be able to trust somebody. And
right.
And if you don't trust yourself, you need to be able to trust somebody is going to
and
help
when
you.
Someone shows up in your studio, my office, they're saying, I need to trust someone, I'm willing to trust you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's what ethics is all about. It's not violating that trust.
Exactly. Yeah. That's a good place to end on.
Yeah, that's a fast hour or so.
Yeah, I don't know.
Damn.
Well, time flies when you're having fun.
Yeah, I guess so.
Anyways, I want to thank you all for being here. Really appreciate you joining us for this time. Of course, I want to thank my good friend Norman, lovely person, good person. Just a great blessing to be able to spend some time with him. So many blessings to all of you.
Adios.